in restaurants is an enjoyable experience for many. It is also one of the many indulgences people give to themselves. But what happens when that enjoyable experience is ruined, such as the case of Allison?
Mahilig ako kumain sa mga restaurants. Mahilig ako mag-resto hopping. Parang ayun ang passion ko. Gusto ko matry ko every restaurant, whether karinderya, fast food, or fine dine. Fast food, mga siguro 3 times a week. Kasi minsan tatamad ako magluto. Minsan pag nasa labas ako, ayun yung mas convenient eh, mas mabilis. Parang ito isang local fast food chain, sa may amin lang. So, order ako ng pasta at saka chicken, isa sa mga combo meals nila. So, nung kumakain na akong gano'n, hinahalo ko yung pasta, hindi naman siyang gano'ng kasosi. So, kita mo yung kung ano yung laman ng pasta na yon. So, nung nakasubo na ako, nung hinalo ko siya ulit, may mga parang paa ng ipis kasi mas spiky siya eh. So, dinala ko siya doon sa counter. Tapos pinakita ko, sabi ko parang may paa ng ipis. So, yung nag-entertain sa akin na crew, parang medyo rude siya. So, tinawag nila yung manager. Tapos tinignan yung manager yung food, yung plate ko, na medyo skeptic siya. Sabi nga, hindi, parang hibla ata to ng karne. Which is hindi naman, kasi pahaba siya eh. Tapos nung na-confirm nga niya na parang paa siya ng ipis, parang nag-offer siya na nag-sorry naman siya, nag-offer siya ng palitan. Pero hindi na ako, parang ayoko na kasi feeling ko naman, so since merong isang foreign thing na dun sa food ko, feeling ko contaminated na yung kung ano man merong food sa kanila dun sa kitchen nila.
What are the laws that apply to restaurant services? What does the government do to protect consumers from restaurants that give bad services? What are the penalties for restaurants that do not follow the laws? Good evening, I am attorney Karen Jimeno and you are watching Legal Help Desk on the Solar News channel. This show is about making the law work for you by giving legal advice on topics that matter to you.
And I'm Attorney Nepomuceno. Tonight, we will be discussing your legal rights on the issue of consumer rights with regard to restaurants. What you need to know about your rights as a customer of a restaurant and what you need to do when you are in a situation where you're inconvenienced. We'll discuss this with our guest who is in charge of handling such cases in one of the biggest cities in the metro.
Our guest for tonight is Mr. Gary Domingo, Chief of the Business Permit and Licensing Office for Quezon City. Good evening, Mr. Domingo.
Hi, good evening. Hi,
Good
evening.
evening. So,
You know, I was so impressed that he's our guest today. He's
Yeah, I know.
really had a lot of experiences with business permit, licensing,
I
not
know.
only in Quezon City,
Yeah.
before for the city
Before
of...
I served as the Chief of Business Permits and Licensing Office in Pasay City for ages during the time of Mayor P.V. Trinidad. And now I'm 2 years into my job as BPLO Chief of Quezon City under Mayor Herbert Bautista.
so you've seen a lot of complaints in your day.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and he
complaints
knows
every day.
very well how to handle it.
Yeah.
So let's
Yeah.
go to the case
the
of
case study, yeah.
Allison.
Yeah.
Kasi I'm sure she's not the only exception. I've had friends who have also had experiences with either insects, minsan hair,
Yeah.
sa food.
Yeah.
Yeah, normally in cases like that, since we are also implementing the Sanitation Code of the Philippines and also we have local ordinances that deals on sanitation, complaints like that, we can go to our office and we
Yeah.
can take action on
Can
that.
take action. And now, normally, in the usual, what are the usual cases? Is it normally they had maybe stomach pain or they
Yeah,
got sick,
yeah.
or is that the usual?
Yeah, that's the
complaint they
usual,
have?
or those with like foreign objects,
Right.
like insect parts on their food. But this is one very important thing that our consumers should understand. Their complaint should be documented. If they're saying that the food is dirty, as soon as they see it, they have to document that.
In what
You
way?
They
mean
can
take
get
pictures?
take picture, get the food or have it examined in a laboratory that's accredited by the
Okay.
Have it
But then,
examined.
if you have it examined in a laboratory, won't that be expensive or time-consuming? Which laboratory can they go to?
Any laboratory. We just
Hospitals
need
ba
findings,
meron?
a documentation. Yeah, documentation that will just support their claim.
Right.
Because
Okay.
also we have to understand that there are people
Right.
who do it for a living.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
I've been on the other side. I've represented a firm, a restaurant,
Yeah.
where the complaint was there were cockroaches
But-
in the
But
in the food.
initially, based on their complaint, we can take immediate action by, if they have a complaint letter, usually what we do is to have the establishment inspected.
Okay.
And then after that, we furnish them a copy of the complaint.
Alright.
And to explain to us.
Na Mr. Domingo, meron ba silang timeline within which to complain? Meaning, kunwari, pinalampas mo ng 4 months, 5 months, tapos saka na ka lang nagreklamo. Will that work against them?
Sa amin, sa standpoint ng local, hindi.
Okay.
Time is not of the essence sa amin. Basta sa amin may complainant. But as I've said, the longer it takes, the harder it will be
To
for you
prove,
to
I
prove.
guess, no?
That's
Yeah.
right.
Kasi
oo.
kung meron kang pagkain o soft drinks na nirereklamo, contaminated na siya.
Oo.
Kung na-open mo siya at nagantay ka ng 5 months before you complain.
Yes.
And then naturally, if you look at it, contaminated.
Yeah.
na siya.
Now, a lot of our viewers are probably asking, obviously, your office takes on I guess, kind of a quasi-legal
Yes.
role.
And a lot of
no?
people are probably wondering
Yeah.
why someone from the business permit and licensing office, not someone from the DTI. And I guess this is where you can clarify. Ano ba ang jurisdiction pagka ang rinereklamo ay restaurants?
Yeah.
No, you have to bear in mind that the restaurants will secure their permit from us. So we're the only office who can revoke that permit. And for as long as they have permit, they can operate.
Yeah.
They can have cases filed against them with the DTI or whatever or other national agencies.
Right.
But for as long as they have the permit to operate, they will continue to do business.
Yeah.
Right.
But once we revoke it, even if they don't have any complaints with other national agencies, then their operation
So
will
in
stop.
short,
Yeah.
it's your office. It is the most effective.
Most effective kasi
enforcement
para you can-
agency. Kasi
yeah,
you can
That
close
may be
them
self-serving
immediately.
to say that, but what I'm telling you is the LGU is just mandated by law and was given power that will allow us to immediately take action on any
Now,
So in this case, Allison could have just gone to the office of the city kung nasan yung restaurant,
Yes.
filed a complaint, and then, kasi in this case, she was not even interested
Yeah.
in getting a replacement because she's right. Paano
Yeah.
kung contaminated
Contaminated,
din with
yeah.
mukhang cockroach pa yung nakita niya, marami daw paa, it would have been contaminated. And in
Yeah.
that case, baka hindi lang siya yung biktima, no? So in
Yeah.
that case, if it were in a business permit office, they could close that restaurant.
Right. Now, in terms of legal formality lang, kasi a lot of our televiewers, normally they don't like the idea of having to hire a lawyer to draft a complaint. This one, but they can just go to your office.
They can
and
just go to our office.
write-
When they go
write
to
it
us
there.
and make verbal complaints, what I do is,
okay.
just get a coupon band, just write it and sign it. Give me your number, give me your address. Just
that's
to
all you
see
need.
to it na when we go to the establishment, we have something to show them. And may tao talaga. Kasi sometimes iisip na baka harassment on our
Right.
part. So, and one very good thing going for an LGU like us is the fact that the Supreme Court has ruled in several cases that a business permit is a privilege, meaning it can be revoked anytime.
All right.
Okay.
So now we have some questions naman from our viewers, Gary, if you don't mind. No? Let's answer a few of them and help our guests. Our first question comes from Janina, and she asks us, after eating at a certain buffet restaurant, my friend and I experienced some stomach problems and diarrhea. I consulted with a doctor and was diagnosed with acute bacterial gastroenteritis. I suspected it was from the food that we ate at that restaurant, so I went back to complain. But the manager wasn't very helpful and insisted that I got it from somewhere else because no other customer was experiencing the same thing. So is this still worth pursuing? I've been absent from work for 3 days because of this. So is this, I guess...
Of course, if
yeah.
you think your right is violated, it will always be worth pursuing it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And in our case, if that's the problem on hand, what they need to do is just after they experience that stomach problem, they go to a clinic, just have a medical certificate that says that at this time he or she was diagnosed to be experiencing stomach problems, and then maybe the receipt from that restaurant on that date can support her complaint.
Yun yung mga documentation that they
Just
need.
Yeah.
simple documentation, but you cannot just go to an office, a government office, and say, ang dumi-dumi ng restaurant na yan, nirereklamo ko siya.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
so-
So this is something she could have done, no, Janina. And also, I'd like to point out she's been absent for 3 days. Another maybe remedy she has is, of course, to go to court as well and file for a case for damages. Especially since meron siyang hospital expenses. Sa inyo, kaya nyo bang
Normally,
ipa-reimburse sa
Actually,
restaurant pala
ang
yung cost?
case na yun, namamagitan kami. And mas madalas naman yung pinagbibigyan kami na ito ayusin nyo na lang para hindi magulo because it's not good for your business.
Right.
Kung meron pa tayong ganito na magiging normally naayos namin kahit yung kinukwento ko sa inyo na mga scheme na mag-a-apply ka ng trabaho, pag nag-apply ka na, biglang may 3,000 na medical, tas may bibiling ka na product,
Right.
tas mamaya, ang expense mo na 5,000. Pag nagreklamo sa amin, kaysa isarado namin sila, nire-reimburse na lang.
I
That's
see.
good
Okay.
to-
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it is a
that's
bit
good to
powerful.
know.
no?
Oo.
All right.
Our next question comes from Dominic, and he asks, does the Consumer Rights Act cover cleanliness in food establishments? I've been to several fast food chains that have problems with their facilities, such as bathrooms, and also I notice insects crawling in the corners of the restaurants.
Yeah.
Nako.
I'm not very particular with the details of the provisions of the Consumer Act.
Oo.
But when you talk of cleanliness of establishment, what I know is the sanitation code.
Yes,
We
actually,
are
I was
implementing
gonna
that.
comment that. I think
So-
Dominic's question in this case,
Yeah.
parang he should know that this would be covered by more of the sanitation
Sanitation,
code,
yeah.
not
That's why
Consumer Act.
Yeah, not a consumer. He didn't consume anything.
Yeah.
Pwede nakagamit lang siya ng banyo,
Oo.
di ba?
Yeah.
So it's
it
not,
could be a basis.
yeah.
So that's why for you to secure a permit, one requirement is for you to secure a certificate of clearance
Right.
from the sanitation department of also the local government.
So for any person, katulad ni Dominic, pag napansin nila na madumi yung restaurant, maraming insekto or ipis,
Yeah.
they can go
They
to
can.
the local government and report.
Sa sanitation
They-
office.
No, may sanitation office kami, pero since it
They're
is a
already
requirement to
operating.
us, we can also take action on it.
Yeah, it's a
Pag
requirement for a business
nagreklamo
permit. Yeah.
Pag nagreklamo sa amin, papa-inspection namin yung lugar, and then we just request a personnel from the sanitation department to go with the inspection because the inspection power is with the BPL.
Right, okay.
That's
Pretty good, na? All right, our next question naman comes from Carlos. And he asks us, does the Consumer Act cover street food vendors or street food? Yan, mga fish ball, squid ball. Yan, kasama ba yung mga yan?
Sa local government, ang nagbibigay ng permit sa mga vendors, yung walang particular place.
Okay.
Meron kaming sariling office doon. Ang tawag ay MDAD. Market
MDAD?
Development and Administrative Office Department.
Okay.
Meron
Alright.
kami.
Saan yung office na nagbibigay ng permits in case may reklamo ka sa kanila?
Yeah.
Is it also in the City Hall?
Sa
that
City Hall
area?
din, sa MDAD naman.
Okay,
Sa MDAD.
Ito yung mga walang particular
Location.
address.
Oh, yung mga gumagalaw-galaw
Yung mga
kasi. No?
fishbowl
No permit,
vendors.
NPA,
Yes.
Although yung Yakult vendor under the law is considered a peddler,
Okay.
so BPLO siya. Pero
I
yung
see,
mga
okay.
fishball,
Okay.
ang
Isaw, no?
yeah.
Oo.
So nasa MDAD siya. may
Problema
sarili
niyan,
kaming
it
department.
moves around, di ba? So that cart, you'll have to look for that
Yeah.
person again.
Pero yun din ulit na pagbibigay ng permit ng MDAD, meron ulit sanitation permit yan. Basta lahat ng food products na
Okay.
binebenta, laging meron siyang requirement ng sanitation.
So pag nagkaroon ka ng problema, kunwari food poisoning naman because of yung mga fish balls or isaw na nabili nyo sa kanto, pwede ka rin mag-complain.
Pwede kang magreklamo. Basta, sabi nga natin, moving kasi siya.
Yeah.
Basta makikimalolocate siya.
Oo
So
nga.
just to be sure, in case ganahan kami to eat no in Quezon City, they have to have some kind of permit in their moving stall. Meron
Meron
kayong
sila.
binibigyan?
Meron
Dapat
din
may
sila.
parang plate sila na
And would you
MDAD.
advise viewers to look for that bago sila bumili?
Oh,
Lalo
yes.
na kung
Actually,
mga food carts.
Yes, because that's the purpose of having regulatory power sa
Yeah.
LGU.
Right.
To see to it na itong mga kinakain ng mga mamamayan natin na nasa kalye, nagdaan sa mga inspection
Stringent
at
inspection.
na-examine na malinis naman. So, kung may marumi, that could be a ground to revoke their permit para matigil yung operation nila.
Yeah.
Kaya, it's good that you go to places na may permit.
Okay.
There's a presumption that the establishment went
Yeah.
through the
Yes.
examination.
And if you complain, alam mo rin na
may pupuntahan
marereklamo
ka.
mo
May
sila
pupuntahan
because
ka, yes.
yes. Our next question comes from Pearl, and she asks, whenever my friends and I eat out, my friends would tell me I am very mean to the waiting staff when they give us the wrong order or bad service. They're worried that they might do something to our food if I continue to do this. Am I wrong in asserting my rights as a consumer? Interesting question. Kasi
very
nakapanood ako
interesting.
before
I have some friends who do that.
some show na hidden cameras.
Yeah.
And really, some waiters do that. Parang they spit on the
Spit, yeah.
food or put things in the
Yeah, things,
food.
yeah.
That could. That
Yeah,
could happen.
it's possible.
But
Yes.
it's so
But
hard,
hard to
Oo,
prove, no?
hard
to
to
prove.
prove.
I mean,
yes.
if you put your shoe on the food
So
like
maybe
that, I mean, it's very hard.
the
How can you
complainant
prove
is
that?
just looking at it sa perspective ng yung human nature.
Yeah.
Yes.
If medyo nagalit ka sa isang tao, di ba?
Oo.
Sometimes you think of silly things.
Pero in this question naman, Gary, kung meron bad service nga, can they also go to you to complain?
Of
Kunwari,
course,
very
of
rude
course, of
waiter
course, of course.
and
They can, okay. So it's
they
not just
can.
because in a restaurant, it's not just the product, not just the food, but also the
Yeah.
service, right?
Of course. As I've said, pag mga ganyan na, halimbawa, suplado lang yung mga waiter, may magre-reklamo. Of course, we're the LGU. Kailangan pa rin namin umaksyon dun sa reklamo. Magtatago na lang kami sa mga general law. Okay? Na kailangan hindi kayo, kung nagninegosyo kayo sa Quezon City, hindi naman po pwedeng nagagalit sa inyo yung customer. Hahanap kami ng mga general provisions of the law, yung mga catch-all, to say na, part of your obligation is to keep your customer satisfied.
siguro
To
na
see to-
that goes into their obligation to train their
Right.
staff well as well, to be courteous,
Oo.
na wag naman bastos.
Kasi may
no?
mga public safety, may public policy, may mga public moral. So, doon ka lang lagi general welfare. Kung yung establishment mo lagi na lang na nakakaaway ng customer, so hindi na siya good business sa amin.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, police power ulit. Pag wala kaming
Right.
makitang provision in the exercise of the police power of the local government code, then we can.
That's good to know.
Great.
Let's take a short break. Legal Help Desk will return after these reminders. You're still watching Legal Help Desk on the Solar News channel. And we are still joined by our guest, Gary Domingo, Chief of the Business Permit and Licensing Office for Quezon City.
All right, let's continue answering a few more questions from our viewers. We have a phone-in question. Our caller's name is Inigo. Hi, Inigo. What is your question?
Hi. My question is, I dined in a restaurant in BGC, and I'm just wondering if people are covered for restaurant malpractice if someone has a food poisoning incident.
So what happened, Inigo? Were you the victim of food poisoning?
Yes. Apparently, I was having lunch with a good friend, and I ordered a sea bass on rock salt in one of those fine dining restaurants there. Then after eating, I suddenly had itchiness and a reddish feeling after the meal. So I rushed myself to the hospital after.
And then what did the hospital or doctors find after they examined you?
Well, they informed me that I had a reaction with the food that I just ate, and it's usually caused by a reaction for food that has been frozen or not cooked properly.
All right, so maybe you can ask Gary.
yeah, Gary,
Yeah,
what-
as I've said earlier, complaints like that can be addressed by our office, but to prove that, we again to need the medical certificate, maybe the receipt that on the same day that you experience that, yun talaga yung day na kumain ka sa restaurant na yun.
Yeah.
So that could be a good start
Yeah.
for us to go to the establishment. And I said, merong medical certificate dito at sabi ng doktor na food poison nga siya at meron siyang resibo na hawak na same day.
Same day, yeah.
Ay, ito yung nagkaroon siya ng food poisoning.
Yeah.
So, pinapag-explain namin sila.
All right.
Okay,
So to answer
yeah.
Bruce's question,
I'm wondering,
sorry.
is Inigo still on
can.
the line or
Yeah.
wala na? I was just wondering kung nakakuha ba siya ng medical certificate, na-keep niya ba yung receipt,
Yeah.
and maybe if we can prove, di ba,
Yeah,
na
yun yung
connected yung
sinasabi ko
dalawa.
na information na kailangan malaman ng ano natin, ng mga consumer natin na other than we are guarding their right also, due process should
also prevail.
prevail na kailangan
Right.
bigyan din natin ng right tong ipaliwanag.
Yun
the
nung
only way
restaurant.
to weigh yung sitwasyon is ito yung dokumento, well documented yung nangyari, o ito, sige, you answer that.
Yeah.
Kasi due process pa din.
Oo. Kasi iba pwedeng sabihin, allergic reaction yan nung customer.
Yeah.
But then if you have a doctor saying naman na, no, this is usually caused by frozen food, in the case of Inigo, not stored properly, then
Yeah.
it might really be the liability
But
of the
defense ba
restaurant.
yun? Defense ba yun? No other person, let's say no other person, earlier, you had that case, no other person got sick.
No, it's
It
not
was
a
just you.
defense,
It's
of
not a
course.
defense,
Or
oh.
we'll be handling it
That-
on this case lang.
Alright,
You know?
Kasi that's what they
It
normally
could be
say.
a good thing na marami kayo.
Yes.
Pero not because iisa ka, that doesn't mean na yung right mo hindi naman na-violate o hindi ka
Yeah. Yeah.
na
And more often than not, because the penalty is possible closure,
Yeah.
they'll
Yeah.
find a way to.
And
Normally.
Gary actually made a good point nung commercial break nag-uusap tayo na it is more effective for consumers to report to the local government kasi pag court nga naman, minsan yung ginastos mo sa pagkain and dun sa ospital, mas maliit kesa sa babayaran mong lawyer, pag-file mo pa sa court,
Yeah.
yung pagpunta mo sa hearing, no?
Yeah. So, when it comes to food complaint, it goes against our
Yeah.
interest, but maybe you don't
Yeah,
really
that's why-
need a lawyer.
Exactly. It goes against our interest, but we're advising consumers out there to go to your local government and offices like the one that Gary heads na they can revoke permits or address your complaints right away.
Right.
Okay. Bruce is asking us, aside from serving bad food, what other acts committed by restaurants can be considered as violations of consumer acts?
Ang unang-una, when you're talking of a restaurant, talagang ang number one naman na basis ng complaint nila is usually sanitation.
Right.
Okay.
Yung dumi, yun usually. Pero of course, if there are arrogant or disrespectful mga restaurant personnel, staff, of course,
Yeah.
pwedeng i-address yan.
Now-
O may iba pa yung, kunwari security, yung mga
Yeah,
security
security
na, or yung mga bouncers din minsan that
Right.
can be very rude, pwede rin i-complain
Pwede
sa
rin.
office nyo.
Tsaka yung may nawala kang gamit sa loob.
Ayan,
really?
very
Pwede
interesting
yan.
topic.
That's
Really?
very
Oo.
important.
What do you mean
Kasi
if I left my phone? If I left my
Yeah.
phone in a restaurant
Yeah.
and then when I came back,
Yeah.
wala na doon. I
Pwede
can
naman
find-
magreklamo sa atin para ipaalam sa kanila because it's not just the food that they should see to it na maayos. Of course, kung kakain tayo sa restaurant, sa consumer, gusto natin safe tayo.
Yeah.
How can we eat properly if we keep looking at our bags because we know
Yeah.
that we are not protected.
Yeah.
So part
Yeah.
of their obligation is also security of the consumer.
What if there's a notice that says we are not going to be liable for things?
Actually,
Be
Karen is
careful.
discussing that. It's like the contract of adhesion you find in mga bus tickets.
Yeah. Or-
Di ba meron ng Supreme Court on the matter? Yung contract of
Yeah.
adhesion.
You cannot
You
waive
cannot
your
waive, yeah.
liability. So yung tama, so Gary makes a good point. It is the responsibility of establishments to provide security to their customers. Kaya yung mga sa inyo, pag nawalan kayo ng gamit,
Yeah.
he was telling us earlier, meron customer nawalan ng iPhone sa isang
Yeah.
restaurant and they were able to intervene and
Yes.
make the restaurant
Replace.
replace
Yeah,
the
replace the
iPhone.
iPhone.
So
Wow.
keep that in mind, customers. That's
Yes.
very good information.
Very good information. All right.
And David is asking us, what government agencies can I go to again in order to file a complaint against a restaurant that served us food that resulted in giving me and my family E. coli? What legal recourse do I have? Ito yung pinag-uusapan na natin na.
Kasi kung food poisoning yan, ang pwede natin ikaso talaga is for damages.
Which is a
Damages
court
lang naman
case,
talaga. So
right?
it's a court
Yeah.
case. You file a case if
you're-
you want to ask for damages, you go to the court and file a civil case against establishment. But as I've said, kung ang gusto mo lang is madinig ka, pupunta ka sa local. Ang sigurado madidinig ka nung establishment.
And it's possible that maybe because the penalty nga is closure, is possible closure, they might provide
Pwede
some
rin, no?
form of
Mas mabilis at least na
some form of
resolution ng
damage. Yeah.
kaso. No? Gary, sorry, I have another question. Yung meron nagtanong ng other acts of violation, di ba? Paano naman yung mga parang unfair practices ng restaurants? Sometimes meron iba mag-advertise na coupons for 50% off, kunwari. But then, meron palang fine print, pag dinala mo na doon, ay hindi kailangan may minimum purchase kayo na 3,000 pesos. So you end up spending more than what you had intended. Just
Yung
to
mga
use
ganyan na
yung
mga
promos.
unfair
Oo, may mga
business
nagreklamo
practices.
na ba sa inyo?
Sa DTI yan nagre-reklamo.
Okay.
Kasi may meron din silang mga promos. Sa DTI pa din kasi yung kinukuha ng permit. Per DTI permit number
Yes.
ganito. So doon nila normally dinadala.
Okay. So pag may mga complaint na lumapit sa inyo, you just guide them na, hindi sa amin yan, punta kayo sa
Ginaguide
DTI.
namin.
Okay.
And minsan naman kahit ganun, kung kaya na, sinusubukan na rin namin. As I've said, kasi nga local eh.
Yeah.
Personal yung approach because the local is headed by a politician.
Right, of course.
So, kung yan national, yung tiga Quezon City naman, residente naman yung nagrereklamo, sinusubukan na namin na puntahan yung establishment and inform them of the complaint lodged against them o yung concern ng consumer
I
natin.
see. Now, quick question lang. No? For example, I'm eating in a restaurant, in a branch in Makati, but their head office is in Quezon City. Can I?
Yes.
So I can do
Yes,
that?
yes.
So even if I was in Makati, head office is in Quezon City, I can go to you?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
All right.
We only have a few minutes left, so let's use the remaining time to give a recap of what we have discussed for the benefit of our viewers. So first, I guess let's clarify, no? Just because consumers nga ang mga pumupunta sa restaurants, it doesn't mean that only the Consumer Act of the Philippines applies. Most of the time nga, it doesn't, no? Because when you talk about Consumer Act of the Philippines, it's usually mga distribution, sale of products, or manufacture of
promos,
products.
yeah.
Yes. So, a lot of it has to do with Sanitation Code of the Philippines, and again, if you're a victim of food poisoning, you can go to the courts and file a case for damages. But I think after this episode, we know that the easiest way to address this is go to your local government.
BPLO, the Business
Yes.
Permits and Licensing Office.
Yes,
Yeah,
like what Gary hits. And any tips, Mr. Domingo?
No, as I've said, the local government is mandated and we have power to immediately take immediate action on complaints. Because local-based kami. So, kung titingnan mo sa standpoint na mas mabilis, I'm sure if action is, ang action ang inaantay, mas mabilis talaga sa local.
Great.
That's good to know.
Good
talaga.
to know.
Very comforting to know.
Yeah.
Lalo na we all eat in restaurants, di ba?
Yes. Now I can eat in a Quezon City restaurant in peace.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Oh, we'll get Gary's number. But would you know, Gary, all cities should have this business
Permit,
or
yeah.
permit
They have.
office.
I'm
And they're,
very sure about
they're
it.
also as accommodating as you or your office.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's great.
That's very comforting to know.
All right, comforting indeed. So unfortunately though, that's all the time we have for today. We'd like to thank our guest for being with us tonight and explaining your legal rights on the issue of consumer rights with regard to restaurants. I'm Attorney Rod Nepomuceno.
And I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. Join us again next Monday as we talk about your legal rights on the issue of consumer rights on travel agencies here on Legal Help Desk. Good night.